Hello and welcome to the Political Opinions podcast, where every opinion is given equal footing and political tolerance and debate are given their proper attention in a world where both are on the decline. Today's episode will cover different opinions on the abolition of the British royal family. The British monarchy is one of the oldest monarchical institutions in the world, having existed almost uninterrupted for over 1,000 years, except of course the 11 years of Cromwell's protectorate. The royal family is one of just a handful that survived the revolutions in Europe in the 18th, 19th and 20th centuries. The history of this small island nation is most commonly seen through the legacy and stories of its former kings and queens, and even to this day it remains one of the United Kingdom's most defining features. The United Kingdom is the only polity in the world with kingdom in its name, and Queen Elizabeth II holds more head of state positions than any other living person, and potentially anyone throughout history, although I'm not entirely sure Queen Victoria or someone else may have held more. In recent decades, however, the British royal family has come under fire for being outdated, corrupt, racist and other criticisms. Calls for the abolition of the monarchy have always existed, but today these calls seem more relevant and widespread. In the wake of Meghan Markle's damning accusations against the House of Windsor, it is time to assess the different opinions on the abolition of the monarchy and see how they relate to one another. I will take the royal family to mean direct descendants of the Queen, none of the 15th cousins twice removed, whatever it is, and I will also use the phrases interchangeably with monarchy. These arguments are based in the UK, but can still apply generally to other countries when placed in the right context. And as always, for more information, there are relevant links in the description. Quick reminder, the aim of this episode, as always, is to not try and argue for or against one side of the debate, but rather to highlight the different opinions on the topic and provide a comparison between them. With all that being said, I will begin with the arguments in favour of abolishing the royal family, followed by those opposed, with a comparison as always at the end. Beginning with the arguments in favour of abolishing the British royal family. Firstly is the fact that the British monarch holds no political power anymore. The functions of a monarch could very easily be replaced and expanded by an elected individual or political body. Some people argue that the monarchy is an outdated institution, which therefore has no place in the modern political world. Similar to the point above, the position of the monarch is hereditary, and as such, the eldest child of the monarch will inherit the position regardless of whether people want them to or not, and regardless of any character flaws. People argue that as the British monarch is the head of state, and as it is a hereditary position, it is undemocratic. It's hard to say you live in a democracy to some people when what is, nominally at least, the most powerful position in the realm, the head of state, is not democratically elected, and to some an elected head of state would serve to cement British democracy and replace what is to some, again, an outdated institution. The royal family is also very expensive, costing directly about £75 million a year in taxpayers' money. Some people argue that it is not right that a group of individuals who have done nothing to earn their position have a life of privilege paid for by ordinary people. Some people say the money would go to better use if the monarchy were abolished, and there are almost infinite possibilities for that better use, be it funding education for poorer people, improving housing, etc. And also there is some research which claims that Britain loses up to £500 million a year economically due to the royal family, although numbers are disputed, so I won't go into much detail on that. Most members of the royal family also do very little work when related to ordinary people. They may do charitable work, but that's mainly ceremonial, and their figure of the charity, they don't actually do much actual charity work, and even in their role as dignitaries to other states, some people simply see it as a paid-for holiday with little work on the side. And that begs the question, why should these individuals receive special treatment for their birth position? It goes against the entire idea of a liberal democracy, where birth should not define you, but in the royal family, birth is the only thing that defines you, to be honest, at least to begin with. Some people also argue that the royal family is an outdated, backwards and potentially racist institution. claims by Meghan Markle that the royal family is inherently racist have revived demands to abolish the monarchy as a critical remaining legacy of Britain's colonial past, which some people view as a bad thing and want to be distanced from. Many members of the royal family have also acted in a way that is offensive to their position. The pretty horrible accusations against Prince Andrew recently have served as a reminder that the royal family are just people, and despite their privileged position, they still often serve their own interests first. Some people also argue that the monarchy fails in its role as a defender of democracy. Technically, the Queen should be able to act to defend democracy, given that she can, at least on paper, hire and fire prime ministers, dissolve parliament, do many other things. But to some, following her refusal to sack Boris Johnson after he, according to the Supreme Court at least, unlawfully prorogued Parliament in 2019, this claim has again been thrown into question, and some people question the actual use of the monarchy today. And finally, some people argue that the royal family promotes chosen values which are not inherent to the British people. The legend and history that comes with the British monarchy is to some misplaced, and instead they see it as a manufactured image created by the state and by the royal family itself to glorify Britain, and in reality it doesn't serve the true purpose. To some it is simply a legacy of racism, oppression and a past we have left behind, and that the monarchy too should be confined to history as an outdated and costly institution that in fact works against many of the values with which people in Britain hold today. Moving on now to those who oppose the abolition of the monarchy. Responding to arguments that the monarchy serves no purpose, there is a truth that British Prime Ministers have often found audiences with the Queen very useful, and in fact most British Prime Ministers meet the Queen on an almost weekly basis. The Queen has a wealth of experience and knowledge that comes in handy in terms of statesmanship, and that given royals in general spend almost all their time in the public and diplomatic light, they can often provide useful advice and experience to Prime Ministers. Charles has spent a long time working in the diplomatic sphere, and as such when he becomes king, he will likely again have at least something to offer future Prime Ministers in terms of experience. Monarchical state visits, as a part of this, can also serve to be free from political influence. A president or Prime Minister always has a short-term political agenda. However, the Queen, by law, has to be neutral, and as such, her visits and receiving visitors can serve to foster good relations with countries regardless of their political outlook. The monarchy, as another part of this, serves as a strong, non-political example of British national values. It is extremely important to British culture and history, and to remove it would leave an extremely large void in the idea of being British. The British family can also serve to promote tourism and revenue from royal lands. While the actual number is disputed, there are those who argue that the British monarchy makes more than it costs in terms of the UK economy. Tourists come to see royal palaces and castles, and they do it on higher numbers compared to other countries such as France, because these castles and these palaces are still used by royal people, and that therefore makes them more interesting and gives them more of an air of importance, essentially. It can also help create a brand for being British, which helps trade and the economy as a whole, and in regards to revenue from royal lands, at least in the past, it was known to make more money than cost the government, and therefore to some, the British family, or royal family rather, is beneficial economically, although again it's disputed, depending on which figures you use. The work that members of the royal family do is also very important. The charity work promotes the good that these organisations do. Their state visits help to foster relations, and every major royal does work for the public good and receives public support in return. Now, particularly on the point of charities, although they themselves may not be doing the actual work in the charity, the voice and the face that they give it help it be promoted and help it potentially do more than if they weren't there to begin with. Some people also argue that the monarchy has started to reform and modernise, Recently, for example, a bill was passed which allows firstborn daughters to have priority over sons for succession. Charles was also allowed to marry a divorced woman, which was the cause of Edward VIII's abdication in 1936, and Harry is the first royal to marry a woman of colour, which are all stepping stones to modernisation, and prior to Harry and Meghan's departure, some were seeing the royal family as a really modern institution. However, these claims have been thrown into question. In regards to individual royals, most of them do live up to their expectations, particularly the younger generations. William and Kate are examples of popular young members of the royal family who mainly do more good than harm, and Harry and Meghan, again prior to their departure, were very popular in terms of the royal family. However, now again, that's all been thrown into question, so that's a completely different point which we don't have time to go into today. But essentially, most royals do live up to their expectations. The Queen is very popular. The Queen and the Princess Royal is also quite popular. Obviously Prince Charles, Camilla, maybe not as much so, Prince Andrew definitely not so, but again it's more down to individuals than the monarchy as a whole. Some people also say that the Queen serves her constitutional role, responding to the fact that she didn't fire Boris Johnson. Some people argue it simply wasn't her place to do it. She's not an elected public official, and if she did fire the elected leader of the country, that could cause an extremely large political backlash, and as such, some people argue that the Queen is doing her job and never overstepping her powers. She has soft power, and that is what they want to use with the monarchy, not any form of hard power that may legally at least remain. And finally, the royal family is a staple of the British image, the whole idea of Britain, particularly in its past. And as such, to some, to abolish it would serve to remove an incredibly important aspect of British history, and would do more harm than good, particularly given the other benefits that have been mentioned before. Moving on now to the comparison. Firstly, on the question of, does the monarchy have a political purpose? Well, those supporting its abolition claim it doesn't. The monarchy holds no real power anymore, and could be better served by an elected president. Their role is purely ceremonial, and due to other factors, they therefore oppose the abolition of the monarchy. However, those supporting the monarchy believe that the Queen and other royals have experience, which they can offer to prime ministers, they can offer to other areas of the political life, and the monarch can serve British interests free from political influence, which is something that no other political body can really do. On the question of the economic costs and benefits, those opposing the royal family believe that it's very expensive, the money can be better spent elsewhere, the fact that money is being spent to people who have been born into this position is wrong, and also there are claims that money is lost for the British economy. However, those on the other side argue that the royal family makes Britain money through tourism. It creates a British brand, which is good for trade, and again there's competing claim that it's good for the economy. On the question of individual members of the royal family and how they play into this, those opposing the royal family argue that most members of it do very little work. Many of them are bad people who have done very questionable things, and as such the fact that they receive titles, praise, privilege for being who they are is wrong. However, those opposing this believe that most members of the royal family do in fact serve their country well. They serve a different role to ordinary people, and eventually we have to accept that. It's the price they pay, for example, for doing charity work, for being diplomats, for essentially serving as a politically free promoter, essentially, of Britain. And also that there are very popular members. The younger generations, William, Kate, Harry, again prior to everything that happened, were all very popular members of the royal family, and it's really the current generation between this young generation and between the Queen which are quite unpopular, and given that they're all old, as sad as it is, they will die off at some point, as everyone does, and as such, some people argue that in the future, the monarchy will be far more popular. On the question of what does the royal family pose to the meaning of democracy, well, those opposing the royal family believe that the monarchy serves to cement British privilege and inequality in society. Hereditary offices rewarded to people by birth goes against almost every ideological aspect of a Western liberal democracy. It's the opposite of meritocracy, and as such many people believe it is wrong and serves as a reminder that society is not where we want it to be. However, those supporting it argue that the monarchy serves a very specific purpose. Most royals do earn their place, and certain individuals acting badly isn't widespread enough to negate all the good that the royal family does. Yes, the royal family is a staple of privilege, but some argue that given it's such a small number and given the positive work they do, that isn't necessarily bad. On the question of is the royal family an outdated institution? For those who oppose the royal family, there are claims that it is racist, sexist, and promotes values of time that has long since passed. Some people argue that it is very slow to reform, it continues to be exposed, and instead of actually changing ever since the death of Princess Diana and the backlash of, for example, the Queen being cold, the royal family has instead simply worked to manufacture a public image which isn't actually true. However, those supporting the royal family argue that they are modernising, they are improving over time. There are numerous changes that have been made and continue to be made, and actions of certain individuals within the royal family and within the institution of the monarchy do not define it as a whole. On the question of the cultural value of the British monarchy to the idea of being British, well, to some it serves merely to glorify a past which is colonial and some people want to distance themselves from. It's an outdated manufactured image that shouldn't be perpetuated as continually as it does so, and the abolition of the monarchy and the royal family, for some, would serve to promote Britain as a modern democratic state rather than one holding on to a colonial past. However, those supporting the family believe that it is a critical part of British legacy and history. You would be removing what has been the most continual piece of British history for over 1,000 years, and one that serves to promote a positive image of Britain, and as such removing it to some would be a very bad idea. And then finally on the question of can the monarchy protect democracy? Well, those opposing the royal family believe that the Queen has failed to defend democracy in the past and will never be able to prevent a dictatorship or any other form of government breaches of power purely because she doesn't have the power to do so or potentially is scared. However, those on the other side believe that the Queen shouldn't be doing this to begin with. She has never overstepped her power, she has shown respect for democracy and is not meant to serve the function that some people have applied to the royal family today. Their role is as a soft power institution rather than a branch of the government and of the state which uses hard power, which most government bodies do. Overall then, those who support abolishing the British royal family do so because it serves as a present-day reminder of an outdated past, cements privilege in the British society, costs more the country than it gives, and to some is simply outdated. It's not needed and merely serves to cost people money, to be honest. Those on the other side, however, support the monarchy for its crucial position in British culture, support the work that the British royals do for the wider idea and benefit of Britain, and believe that it pays for itself over time at least. It seems that so long as Queen Elizabeth lives, calls to abolish the monarchy will likely account to nothing due to her personal popularity. Given Charles's questionable past and disagreements about his actions in relation to Diana and Camilla, there may be rising calls for republicanism both in the UK and Commonwealth nations. We will have to see, however, what happens with him in the future and whether the popularity of William is enough to stifle the dislike of Charles. Ultimately though, what do you think on this issue? Do you think we should or shouldn't abolish the royal family? Do you prefer certain members of the royal family? Do you think we should skip Charles? That's actually something I've heard recently, although again, it's all an opinion. Let me know what you think of it. And on my point of view, is there anything that I got wrong, missed or could do better? Let me know as always in the comments or on Twitter, and be sure to check back next Monday for another episode. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you all soon.